This is the Josh Podcast Show, the anti-podcast podcast on God and man. The show that everybody's talking about. The show that will become a necessary part of your weekly mental diet. The show that picks up where JoshRolfe.com leaves off. The show title that uses the word podcast 4 times. Introducing your host, Josh Rolfe.
Hey there, all right. It has been a while, a long while. And it's a very windy night, windy and rainy in sunny Sacramento. Did you know that Sacramento, California is one of the sunniest places on the planet? I was just curious. We've had so much rain, and I was looking up our average rainfall and found that factoid on Wikipedia just now as I was delaying and procrastinating recording this episode because I'm starting to get a little tired. But when I hit record, the adrenaline kicks in. I wake up, and I did hear a trash can tumble over outside the wind. I want you to know that I do think about this show all the time. It's been a little while since I last recorded, but I want to talk about why today. It's because I wrote a book. That's the title of the episode. I wrote a book. And I have talked about this book several, if not many, many times on this show. I've mentioned that I am working on a book or books. There are several that I've been kind of dabbling in, and I'll talk about that in a little while. But first, I wanted to say that if you love podcasts, and I wouldn't say I love podcasts, but I do spend a considerable amount of time listening to podcasts, then I want to share with you a great podcast email that I have been receiving. This is not an advertisement. I do not have enough listeners to get paid for ads, so I'm doing this out of the goodness of my heart. There is a website called inside.com. Founder Jason Calacanis is a guy that if you're into the startup scene, he is a mentor to many thousands of startup folks across the globe. He is, but this is his venture. He started it a few years ago, and they have several emails. Their niche is email news, email information. So if you're interested in any one of their many verticals, they call them, any one of their many subjects, then check out inside.com. And one of them is on podcasts. And they started it, I don't know if it's been 2 years yet ago, but it was now it's written by a Sky Pillsbury, I think is the name. And she or he is on Twitter. I think it's a she is on Twitter, but last I checked a little while ago, they don't tweet. But the way that this person curates the emails, they have a 10 bulleted list of either new podcasts or podcasts that are in the news, or studies on podcasts. And since podcasts only continue to grow, we reached saturation point, I think, probably 2 or 3 years ago. And yet I continue to be amazed at how many more podcasts are being created. I think it's kind of getting into ridiculous territory. And you see that on this podcast email. But as an amateur podcaster, the inside email is very informative to me, but it is also very depressing, and it's validating. Depressing because there are so many podcasts, so many, too many. There were too many when I started, I think. And then Serial happened. Not the kind you eat for breakfast, but the serial crime podcast that just took off, and then where people had heard of podcasts but had never listened to one. Serial was sort of the gateway drug into this new medium that isn't new, but more people were getting into it. And then all these podcast media companies or broadcast networks that were trying to start the next ABC, CBS, NBC of podcasts started. And one of the top of those was called Gimlet, which is perhaps the worst named podcast company name of them all. They were just recently acquired, or the announcement of their future acquisition by Spotify has been announced. And so hopefully they absolve and get rid of their heinous name, because Gimlet, it's just the worst name. And the founder, he acknowledged that it was probably not the best name, but I don't know. It just sounds goofy to me. So Spotify's bought them. Gimlet runs a lot of shows, Reply All. They do their show Startup, and they have a bunch of others. Some they've experimented with, others that I haven't tried out or checked out. But Inside.com has all the latest news on podcasts, and you might find your next favorite podcast on it. I started out saying that I think about my show all the time, but I am spending lots of time listening to podcasts. And when I said I'm thinking about this show all the time, I'm thinking about how I want to record more. I want to record more episodes, get back to once a week, because that is the ultimate goal. And every Tuesday night, I think about this show and how I have no time to do it. I may have to adjust to maybe Wednesday because my kids have some activities Tuesday nights, and tonight they did not go because one of my kids is sick. So that's what freed up some time to focus on the show tonight. So here it is, 10:45 p.m., and I'm finally recording for the first time since November, and it's late February, but I am excited to do it because I do enjoy doing this, as I have said many times over the last 4 years plus of doing the show. So, where am I going with this? My book. What else do I want to say? I guess my point is I have not forgotten about the show. That's what I wanted to say. Today, I've been working on a few episode ideas that aren't quite ready for prime time. And as I explained earlier, I have mainly been focused on, and the primary reason for not podcasting is around October of last year, of 2018, I remembered my book. And you could say remembered my book. And when I say my book, it is the book that I have been writing. I have been writing it forever. And I wanted to just check on that. Earlier today, I looked at how I was trying to check back to see when I first started the book, when the idea first came to me. And at least the first time I wrote down the title of the book, which I have stayed true to and kept exactly the same from the day I came up with the idea, was in October 2014. So that's 4+ years now of working on this book. But then I've been thinking that was the day that I started the book and started writing it, but it really wasn't until it was October the idea came. I forgot about it for a couple months, and in January of 2015, I started writing like a half page of just bullet points and concepts and ideas. All of that year, 2015, I did very little. So by the end of the year, I had about 50 pages. And then in 2016, you could say I actually started the book for real and got really serious about it. And by the end of 2016, I had over 200 pages. And since then, so 2017 and 2018, I've been in the editing process. And I have deleted big chunks of it, thrown new chunks in, but it has consistently stayed within that 200 or so pages in Word. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. Now, this is not interesting at all to you because you don't even know what the book is about. So I realize I'm now talking to myself. But maybe this would be something if anyone is interested a while from now and the book's been out there and you can go back and hear about the early history of the book. So I guess because I'm not finished with some of my other podcast ideas, the reason being because I've been focused on this book, I did want to announce that I have written the book. I have finished the book, even though it was finished in a sense in 2016. It wasn't finished in my mind. It still had a lot of chapter ideas that I hadn't finished, but the book right now, as of today, has 44 chapters. It has a long intro, a long preface, an epilogue, has every division of a book. It has sections, has 5 sections that each of those chapters falls within a section. And there is a progression in the book. There is a story arc. But I really don't feel comfortable saying much more than that publicly because I'm scared. I am scared of what I'm up against next. It's kind of like law school. I started law school. I did not finish. I did 1 semester. But if you want to become an attorney, you go through 3 years of law school, which is 6 semesters, 2 semesters each year of reading case law in all these different areas. And you're finally finished 3 years later, but you're not really finished because then you have to take the bar exam. And the bar is one of the most grueling tests that's out there. It takes a lot of time of study, months of intense study on all you've learned, and then trying to figure out that state that you want to pass the bar in. And so I am in the equivalent of the bar exam on the next step of this book, which is how to get it published. And whether I go the route of getting it published through a traditional publishing house or by trying to self-publish, I think both are equally as difficult. My preference is to go the traditional route at first. And if there is no interest out there, and may have heard the stories of all the rejection letters that people get, there's a few different ways of doing it. And I've been doing tons of research on that aspect of publishing, getting an agent, finding an editor, getting published, finding a publisher. There's just a lot that goes into it. And for being someone who has never published anything and who also doesn't have a strong platform, because that's a big issue for publishing, especially with the big New York firms. If you're doing nonfiction, which this one kind of is, and that's another issue of the book. So the genre is something that I have to try to figure out because it's I've written what is predominantly a nonfiction book, but it has a lot of fictional elements to it. Overall, the book's desire is to try to make you laugh. It is a comedy or humor book. I haven't seen such a thing as a comedy book, but it falls within the genre of humor. I'd say it's creative nonfiction that has an experimental or a meta quality, META quality, because it is sort of jumping into the mind of someone who is writing, which is me, but also sort of a fictionalized version of myself. So it gets a little tough on trying to figure out how to sell this, because one of the things you need is to know the hook. What is the hook? What is the book about? That's why I hesitate sharing it now, because I haven't fully developed that, and that's what I've been working on since I finished writing the actual book. Now it's defining what it is and kind of the pitch for why anyone should bother. So I'm very excited about it. I can't wait till it's out there for people to rip to shreds and tear down and try to find problems with. Or maybe there's someone out there who will appreciate it and read it and then forget about it like I do with most of the books I read. So stay tuned for more on the book. And until then, I will give this as a little clue. The episode today is called I Wrote a Book, and the book title and what it is about is that very subject. So while that may not make a whole lot of sense to you right now, when you go back, you'll say, yeah, Josh pretty much said what the book is about when he said that it matched the title of his podcast episode 93 called I Wrote a Book. That's the book. I wrote a book. Except it's more about the attempt. It's more about trying. And that's what I'll say about that. So I'll try to keep talking about this on future episodes. I think it would be good to, cover this. And now I'm just delaying and I don't know what I'm talking about. So thank you. Bye. Goodbye. Have fun. See ya.
Thank you for listening to the Josh Podcast Show, the anti-podcast podcast on God and man. For more information, visit joshpodcast.com. Follow Josh on Twitter at JoshRolf. That's Rolf, R-O-L-P as in podcast, H. Now go and have the best day and night ever. And have fun.